All right, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce myself for those of you who didn't hear me do it earlier. My name is Cheryl Pemberton. I'm with the Mid-Continent Public Library, and I host a lot of virtual programs. I just have a few housekeeping announcements tonight. If you could please keep your mic muted during the program. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and Angie will get to them as time allows. And I will include a link to a survey, and I'll put it in the chat at the beginning of the survey and at the end of the survey. I also have some links that Angie has to share of relevant, pertinent information to tonight's program. I also will be emailing those links tomorrow. Tonight's program is being recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow. It depends on the schedule for our virtual program producer. So in the meantime, I want to introduce you to who you already know by now, Angie Strathman, who is our Reader Services Librarian here at Mid-Continent. Thank you so much for hosting tonight, Angie.
Thank you, Cheryl, and I'm glad some of you are able to make it from our rescheduled one. I also see some familiar faces, but for those of you who have not attended one of these Buzzworthy Books programs, we do them quarterly. And most of the time I do like to feature books that are ones that maybe might be new to you. So they tend to be not like huge bestsellers, but ones that might be a debut book or something that might be new to your TBR list. But tonight we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the best books of 2024. But last year I did this in January and people were very excited about it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of some books that are coming out in the first few months of 2025. So I have a lot of books to share, so we'll go ahead and get started, but please feel free at any point to put any questions in the chat. Also, Cheryl will be sending out both in that email and in the chat a link to all of the titles that I'm talking about, so you don't have to like frantically scribble them down. You will have a link to be able to see them, put them on hold, check out even more about them. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by talking a little bit. These were my favorite reads of 2024. However, I've talked about almost all of them at previous Buzzworthy Books programs. So I did include a link to them in the email, but that you can read more about. But in case you have any questions later, these were, after much deliberation, my favorite reads of 2024. But MCPL also has annually put together a list of our staff's favorites. And so we survey all of MCPL staff members, and they share their favorite books in lots of different categories. And that is on our MCPL Best of 2024 page. You can find that on our website. You can just search for Best of 2020 Books of 2024, and you can find them all. They are also in the link that Cheryl is sharing. So I wanted to share a few of the titles that I've heard about from my colleagues that I'm excited to read in the next year. So Cheryl put the link to the whole webpage in the chat right now. So the first book is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean, and this is both of my colleagues in the Reader Engagement Department, Scott and Lindy, recommended this one. It is cozy fantasy is really big right now with writers like Travis Baldree and T.J. Klune and Rebecca Thorne. Also, we're seeing a lot of romantasy, so books that mix fantasy and romance, and this one is a cozy romantasy. But what has me even more excited to read this one is the fact that it also has a magical zoo. A zoo full of dragons and unicorns and griffins and all sorts of other mythical creatures. Ayla is the zookeeper at this magical zoo, and in addition to those unicorns, she also is particularly fond of the phoenixes, and she is much better with animals, even these mythological ones, than she is with humans, especially her rival Luciana, but unfortunately she has to work very closely with Luciana in order to craft a phoenix breeding proposal. So my colleague Scott says, this is a cute romance that gets cuter. It has a zoo with magical creatures, and there is a small heist element. So I'm excited for that as well. It's a cozy romantasy that I really loved. Next, we have historical fiction, The Outlaw Noble Salt by Amy Harmon. This one was suggested by Christian from our Colburn Road Library Center. And Amy Harmon brings Butch Cassidy to life in this highly imaginative and speculative story about the years following the outlaw's disappearance. So while he's kind of hiding in plain sight, Butch Cassidy assumes a new name and a new life in this fictionalized version. And he ends up falling in love with a single mother and opera star named Jane. Christian says, to say I was surprised by the depth of this fictional Butch Cassidy is a gross understatement. This novel is very character-driven with slow burn action. And then we have nonfiction, Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari. This author is best known for his sweeping view of the history of humans in *Sapiens*. Here he takes that same comprehensive approach to information, how humans have organized and advanced, used, and misused information, and how information has shaped our history and culture. As a librarian, I'm definitely interested and invested in this topic. He also explores the world of AI and its potential impact on how we perceive information and on its potential impact on
Alexa, make my light bright.
All right, and this is an overview of how, so this was recommended by Brad in our digital innovation department, who says this book took an overview of how information has been disseminated over the course of human history, from the clay tablets keeping track of livestock in Mesopotamia to the present, to a not so distant future where AI could be used to decide humanity's most important decisions. Another recommended book from 2024 comes from Lindy in the Reader Engagement Department. It's also nonfiction. Night Flyer, Harriet Tubman and the Faith Dreams of a Free People. This is by the author of All That She Carried, which was a National Book Award winner a couple of years ago. And Lindy says, while Harriet Tubman was a very real person, her feats and personal story are almost mythical. Miles intertwines Tubman's story with the story of her world at the time and those of other enslaved women to bring the legend of Harriet Tubman to life. And so this one explores not just Tubman's heroic actions, but also her faith and her knowledge of the wilderness, both of which informed her resilience and her capacity and her role in the Underground Railroad. Next up, we have a graphic novel. Since our Winter Reading Challenge theme is works of art, I thought it would be good to include a couple of graphic novels. If you are new to that format, this is a really great one to start with. It is Lunar New Year Love Story by Jing Wen Yang. This is a young adult graphic novel, but definitely recommended for adults as well. Scott from the Reader Engagement Department says, this is one of my favorite writers. He just knows how to write intriguing stories that center several cultural identities, including his Catholic faith, surrounded by compelling characters. This love story features the embodiment of Saint Valentine, a family cursed in love, and a love triangle that feels reasonable. So this one is about all kinds of love. It explores familial love. There's kind of a father-daughter story here. It's about friendship. There's romantic love. There is that love triangle that is there. And it also brings in a lot of cultural aspects. So you get the everything that goes behind the cultural celebration of lion dancing. And the illustrations are really wonderful as well. Next, we have The Last Delivery by Evan Dom. And this one is about a determined delivery man who takes an enormous box, you see that there on his back, to the address of a mansion where there is a party that is in progress. And so he's trying to track down the owner of the mansions who signed for this package. And along the way, he encounters all sorts of really strange people and strange happenings as he tries to track down the resident in order to sign for the package. This one is recommended by Kayla from the Raytown branch. And again, I haven't read this one yet, but I haven't been this curious about a particular box's contents since I watched the movie Seven. And you can see from the illustrations, it's also very kind of like dark and atmospheric as well. All right, so those were just a few of the books you can find on MCPL's Best of 2024 page. Again, I highly recommend that you look at the rest of the list to see what else you might find that you might enjoy. There's a wide variety of books from lots of different genres and for all age groups. So if you have young kids in your life, you're looking for suggestions for them, we have lists for those as well. But also going on right now, we have our Winter Reading Challenge, which you can read any 5 books up until March 15th. And our theme this year is works of art. So we're celebrating all things artistic. And so I did want to highlight one particular book on that theme from a couple of years ago. It is One Woman's Show by Christine Colson. And this one is a book that takes a very unusual structure. It is told in the form of those museum labels that you see beside paintings. And so it uses that to tell the story of one woman, Kitty, who was born in 1906, and it tells her life story through these museum labels commenting on her at various life periods. So it really shows Kitty as an object, a collector piece whose ownership passes from her husband to her parents, and her value being ebbing and flowing based on her wealth, on beauty, on conformity, and her connections to those who have even more status. So it's a really kind of interesting take on the objectification of women, especially during that time period. So an example of one of the museum labels, Upper East Side girl, age 10, 1916, Caroline Margaret Brooks Whitaker, known as Kitty, the collection of Martha and Harrison Whitaker. Glitter and glow define the vitrine of Park Avenue life, and Kitty plays the role of trifle with gusto. She charms guests at tea with porcelain manners, rippling with charisma like gilding along a rim. Even at age 10, Kitty senses a suffocating tyranny on the horizon. Not the war in Europe, but the fragile need to be forever cared for according to someone else's tastes and appetites. So this one moves very quickly because you just have like that 1 paragraph block per page. And it's also written by the author used to work for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, including writing many of those museum labels. And so it really adds that sense of authenticity to it as well. All right, but now we're moving on to the fun part, which is looking forward to those books that are coming out in 2025. So I'm going to start with a few of them that I've already read. As a librarian, some of the advantages, we often get to read some books before they're published. So I have a few of them I wanted to share that are coming out in the next few months. Up first is Mothers and Sons by Adam Hazlitt. This one came out on January 7th. So this one is already out and available. Our son of the title, or the main son anyway, is Peter. Peter is an immigration lawyer in New York City, and the mother of the title is Anne, who runs a women's retreat center with her partner, Claire. And Peter and Anne have been distant for several years now, and the real mystery of the novel is trying to figure out why the two have become somewhat estranged. We mostly follow both of these characters in separate threads. So we get Peter, his life resolving around his work with asylum clients, and his kind of not really getting close to anybody in his life. He ends up taking on a new client named Vassal, who is a gay Albanian man, and becomes deeply invested in Vassal and his story, in part because it brings up memories from his past that he's mostly tried to put behind him. In the meantime, we also follow Anne in her present day, where she's working at the retreat, and we see how both her work and her relationship with her partner have evolved over their time running this retreat. And so both of their professional lives play a big part in this story. We also get a lot of flashbacks to the past when Peter was a teenager and following his friendship and his first love with Jared. His home life was also very complicated at that time. His parents got divorced, his mother took up with Claire, and his father was also dying of cancer. But most importantly, these years were shaped by a tragic event that occurred when Peter was a teen. And it was the source of his and Anne's estrangement from the ensuing trauma, guilt, and the stories each of them told about the event, which might be different from the stories that they might have competing stories about what happened and why. Other mothers and sons come into play as well, most notably Vassal and his mother. And so it takes a while for all these different threads to cohere, but it really is this really beautiful story about family, about the stories that we tell each other, how we harm and heal each other, and how we are affected not just by the events that happen in our lives, but also by the meaning that we make of them. Also out January 7th is Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. This is a contemporary romance. It is about Emily and Jack, who have been nemesis ever since college. It's a rivalry that continued as they both started working as teachers in the same school. So Jack briefly moves away and becomes engaged to another woman, but has returned back into town after breaking off his engagement and happens to move next door to Emily. So they continue to spar, but it becomes clear now that absence has revealed that their bickering is really fueled by romantic tension. Emily accidentally sends her steamy romance novel to the principal, who's very conservative, and so she enlists Jack to help her get it back in one of my favorite scenes of the book. This one is also really informed by its small town setting. Emily is the oldest sibling, and so her brothers and sisters play a big role, as well as Jack, who is secretly writes his own mystery novels. Jack's relationship with his narcissistic writer father also plays a really big role. So you get the aspect of them being teachers, them being rivals, and both being writers of some kind. Up next, we have Death of the Other by Nadia Okorafor. This one just came out on January 14th. This one is about Zelu, who has just been fired from her adjunct teaching job. And so she decides to write something completely different from the academic things she normally writes. And so she ends up writing a science fiction novel called Rusted Robots. And that book just takes off with the public and becomes a really big bestseller. It's made into a movie. It really changes the trajectory of her life. It also causes friction with her Nigerian American family. And also, her family is very protective of her, perhaps overprotective of her, and they underestimate her because Zelu has been a paraplegic since a childhood accident. But when her novel takes off, it also attracts the attention of some people who have an who do experimental research, and so they give her these exoskeletons which allow her to walk again. This is a book that's really told in a form of a bunch of nested narratives. So we get Zelu's main storyline about the aftermath of the publication of this best-selling book. We also get interviews with people close to Zelu, like her family members, which fill in kind of the backstory and the family dynamics of the book. But most importantly, and my favorite part, is we also get the story of Rusted Robots, the book that she wrote, which is a dystopian science fiction novel that's set in a world where the humans are gone, and you have two kind of competing groups of robots who have differing views about how the world should work now that humans are gone. So I really loved getting all of these different kind of pieces that all cohere together. Nadia Okorafor has been an author that has been on my radar for a really long time, and I'm really glad that I finally read one of her books. Up next, we have Everybody Says It's Everything by Zenit Alou. This one doesn't come out until March, but it's highly worth waiting for. I really love this author's debut novel, Brass, and so was very excited to see she had a new title out. This one follows Drita and Pete. They are twins of Albanian heritage who have been adopted into an Italian-American family. Now they're in their 20s, and their lives have diverged in different ways that kind of reflect their personalities. So Drita is the good girl who takes care of everything, and so now she has come back to her hometown to take care of their mother, and she's definitely resents it. Derelict Pete has disappeared. He ran out on his girlfriend Shanda and his son Dakota. So Shanda and Dakota return back to town and enlist Drita for help. And so Drita needs to track down Pete in order to connect him back to his family. Pete has taken up with a group of Albanian immigrants who have become radicalized by what is happening in Kosovo. This takes place in the 90s. So in trying to track down her brother, Drita also learns more about her Albanian heritage and, more revealingly, some family secrets, including things that their mother Jackie has never told them. So I really loved the kind of different narratives of all three of these different family members and how they intersected. You also get aspects of what was going on in the Balkans in the 1990s and kind of the background of that as well. But most and more importantly, it was a really wonderful family story. Up next, we have Blackwood's Blue Sky by Eowyn Ivey. Eowyn Ivey wrote the book The Snow Child, and so I was very excited to see that her latest was also set in Alaska with a magic realist touch, like her other book. This one has a very loose Beauty and the Beast storyline to it, but very loose. It doesn't follow the story exactly. Birdie is a single mother who lives in Alaska. She longs for freedom, for independence. Emmeline is her very spirited young daughter. And Birdie happens to meet this very reclusive man named Arthur, who has a mysterious past. And she decides that she's going to go move up into the even more remote Alaskan wilderness with Arthur and start a new life. But we slowly get Arthur's past, and it's being revealed, exposing why he's been isolated, why his behavior is really strange. We get the story told through both Birdie and Emmeline and through Arthur's father, Warren, who also narrates part of the story. Several characters make choices to disregard what they know of themselves and what they know of other people in order to choose like hope and possibility that they might change. And that doesn't always work out for the best. But again, this is beautifully atmospheric and the depiction of the Alaskan wilderness, showcasing both the beauty and the harshness to be found there. And it was also, for literary fiction, very propulsive. There's this sense of unease that permeates the whole book, and then several like twists that kind of cause everything to change direction in ways that I didn't expect. And I was also very surprisingly moved by aspects of it as well. This is a perfect one to read at this time of the year in the winter with a blanket and a hot beverage as well. And that one comes out February 4th. Next, we have Run for the Hills by Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson is one of my favorite writers. He always writes with such humor and heart about family, both biological families and found families. This one is a little bit of both. It brings together siblings who were previously unknown to each other on a road trip to find their father. So our main character is Mad, who works on a farm with her mom after their father had absconded when she was a child. And so she's very surprised when a visitor pulls up in a PT Cruiser. And the PT Cruiser plays a very big part in this book, a very comical part in this book. And driving the PT Cruiser is Rube, who claims to be Mad's older brother. So it turns out that before Mad's dad ran out on her, he ran out on Rube as well. And not only that, he has this pattern of taking up with a new family, having a kid, taking on a new job and role, and then getting restless and leaving. And so Rube enlists Mad to accompany him across the country to pick up their other siblings en route to tracking down their dad. Like many road trip stories, this one is all about the journey and the company that you find along the way than it is about the destination. So you get to see how these siblings were shaped by their dad and the hole that he left behind. And this one is out in May. And all of these books are in the catalog for you to place holds on, though, as well. All right. Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I just finished this one this week. It's out in March. This one is a set of nested narratives. So we have a woman who is an academic who is contacted by members of a Montana Historical Society. They found this diary and when they were doing construction, and it is the long lost diary of her great-grandfather. And so we also get her great-grandfather's diary, in which he recounts his story. He was a Lutheran minister in Montana, and he is visited by a Blackfeet man named Goodstab, who tells his story over the course of several visits. He has come to confess to Arthur, who is the minister in this story. So we get these three different layers of the story that all kind of add onto each other. But at its heart, it is a vampire story, even though the words vampire is never used. But it's a very interesting and very different take on vampires that also brings in aspects of Indigenous history as well. There's also a lot of really dark humor into it. I really, really love this. I'm not a big horror person at all, but I will read anything that Stephen Graham Jones writes. And then just for something different, this one is out in February, 44 poems on being with each other, but by Patrick Otrama. And I really love this author's first book called Poetry Unbound, which is an anthology of poems featured on the podcast Poetry Unbound. And it not only introduced me to some really great poets and poems, but it also really taught me how to read poetry better. Because the author, in addition to sharing these poems, also shares his reflections on these poems. And so you get to kind of see like how to pay attention to different parts of the poem as well. So it's a book that really made me appreciate how to read poetry. Great. And so now we're going to move on to books I haven't read, but I'm excited to read in 2025. And I'm going to give you just a very quick taste of a few of them. So up first, we have fiction. We have Life Hacks for a Little Alien by Alice Franklin, coming out February 11th. This one is about a neurodivergent young girl who sees on TV some information about this mysterious manuscript written in an indecipherable language. And she thinks that might be the key to her own differences that she feels. So she enlists her friend Bobby to help find it. This one is being compared to Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine and also to Remarkably Bright Creatures, both really popular books of recent years. And Angie Kim says, an extraordinary debut about a little girl who feels alone in our world. Life Hacks for a Little Alien made me laugh, tear up, and feel hopeful. I love our little alien, the protagonist who sees the world with a remarkable wisdom that comes from her innocence and honesty. And I wish you were real so I could tell her how much her story is a perfect read for anyone who's ever felt different, misunderstood, or lonely. That is for everyone. All right, already out right now and getting a lot of buzz is The Favorites by Lynn Fargo. It is about childhood sweethearts turned Olympic hopeful ice dancers. And their partnership ends at the Olympics abruptly, and 10 years later, an unauthorized documentary is out and is going to tell the behind the scenes of what happened. And so Katerina, the female dancer of the pair, decides that she wants to put her own version of events out there. I'm especially looking forward to the audiobook of this one, which is read by a full cast, including former skater and current skating commentator, Johnny Weir, who supposedly steals the show of the audiobook. It's also described as Wuthering Heights meets The Cutting Edge, and I'm all for that. It's also really great for fans of Taylor Jenkins Reid as well. Then we also have Tilda is Visible coming out in February by Jane Tara. Tilda wakes up one morning and finds that her finger is suddenly invisible. And then as days go on, now her ears are disappearing too. So she goes to the doctor to find out what's wrong and finds out she's suffering from invisibility, which is a common affliction for women of a certain age. So Tilda goes to a support group and a therapist in order to find a cure. Mary Laura Philpott says, Jane Tara cracks open the emotional core of the midlife experience and turns it into a laugh-out-loud, cathartic rom-com for grown women. Read Tilda is Visible and get ready to impress your therapist with your newfound optimism. And keeping along the comic theme, we also have Tartufo by Kira Jane Buxton. This one is out January 28th. Ron Charles of the Washington Post says, forage through the pile of new books this winter, and you aren't likely to dig up a more charming novel than Tartufo. Kira Jane Buxton's story about truffle mania whisks us away to Italy and serves up one buttery page of comedy after another. So this book takes place in a very sleepy little Italian town whose world is about to change with the discovery of a truffle. Will it change for a better or for the worse? And you will have to read the book to discover that. Kira Jane Buxton is a finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, and so this is definitely one, if you like to read funny books, to pick up. Moving on to fantasy, we have Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. This one is about a lake monster and a witch on a magical quest to save their town. So I'm very intrigued by that premise. So Jenny Green Teeth is the lake monster, and she has never befriended a human before until Temperance is dumped into her lake when she is suspected of being a witch. Again, this is on the cozy fantasy end for fans of like T. Kingfisher, who's a little bit darker, but also kind of the coziness of a T.J. Klune as well. We also have The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar, who is one half of the writing team behind the breakout novel, This Is How You Lose the Time War. And so this is her solo debut. It is a novella, so if you like short books, this one's for you. It's about two sisters in a village on the edge of fairyland. One of them falls in love, and so it's really about kind of the conflict between love and loyalty, and it's supposed to be very lyrical and ethereal. We also have Watermoon by Samantha Sada Yambao. This one is a cozy romantasy following a woman who owns a pawn shop that sells regrets. Her father goes missing and she ends up teaming up with a stranger through a mystical world. Booklist says, race through a lush world of pure wonder and romance. Kites made of wishes that become stars, origami that holds time in its folds, and a night market in the clouds. This lovely cozy fantasy is reminiscent of Aaron Morgenstern's The Starless Sea. And so I just love all the imagery that brings up. And so I'm excited, as well as the cover. So I'm excited to see how that reads. And then we have The In-Between Bookstore by Edward Underhill. What would you say to your teenage self? That is the opportunity presented to Darby, the main character of The In-Between Bookstore. Darby is a trans man who returns to his hometown and the bookstore that was a refuge for him as a teen, only to encounter his teenage self behind the counter. And so what does he do now that he sees his younger self at a kind of a troubling period of his life? This one is for fans of The Midnight Library and other books that really deal with aspects of fate and choice in our lives. All right, science fiction, we have Luminous by Sylvia Park. This one is out in March. This is a science fiction detective story, so if you like mysteries, you might also enjoy this one. It is about 3 siblings. June works for a robot crimes unit in Seoul. His sister Morgan is a programmer, and their 3rd sibling is a robot brother that has gone missing. All of this takes place in a near future unified North Korea. This one has got a lot of comparisons to Kazuo Ishiguro, so if you really like Clara of the Sun, you might like this one. Then we have The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip Fracassi. In case you were wondering what these 3 rules are, I was too, and so this is what the book says. So our main character, scientist Beth Darlow, has invented a time travel machine that has these 3 different rules. And they are, you can only time travel within your own lifetime. You only get to time travel for 90 seconds. And like any time travel narrative, you only get to observe. You don't want to change the timeline. Except that Beth discovers that things are changing in her own timeline, even from just observing what's happening. And so we get to figure out what happens and kind of the ripples that happen when time travel occurs. We also have Rose House by Arcady Martine. This one is a novella about an architect who has built these really integrated houses with AI involved in all of them. But there might be something even more sinister embedded in these houses as well. They're seen to be haunted. So the architect has been dead and this house has sat empty for over a year. But a detective gets a call saying that there's a dead body inside. So who is this body? How did it die? And how did it end up there in this house that supposedly no one has access to? And then finally, if you're a fan of Blake Crouch, as I am, you'll want to try Dissolution by Nicholas Benge. This one is out in March. This is about a woman named Maggie. Her husband, Stanley, has dementia, and she has put him in a care facility called Sunrise. But it turns out that Sunrise is this experimental facility that might be stealing people's memories instead of caring for the people who are there. And so that starts the thriller plot of this particular book. So she and a stranger must break Stanley out, and they must break into his memories in order to uncover the truth. Library Journal says, this is a mind-blowing science fiction novel that plumbs the edges of memory and time, a novel about memory, what it means to be human, and the nature of time itself. Benge's latest offers a profound depth of ideas wrapped in a thrilling sci-fi story. All right, moving on to horror, we have Our Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato. The Victorian Psycho of this title is Winifred Nadi, who is a governess who harbors murderous thoughts about the family that she works for. But maybe she's not so psycho after all. Maybe she's pretty sane for having murderous thoughts about this pretty awful family. Paul Tremblay says, riotous, devilishly clever, and deliciously appalling, Victorian Psycho is flat out brilliant. No one is spared, not even us, from Winifred's wrathful whims. She's the anti-hero this or any other century deserves. So if you love reading about unlikable characters, this one is one to give a try. We also have Listen to Your Sister by Nina Weil. This is about a woman named Calla who at just age 25 has become the guardian to her teenage brother. And that's pretty troublesome because her brother has a penchant for getting into trouble. And she also has started having some very disturbing dreams in which her brother is dying. So after Jamie's latest troublemaking encounter, the siblings are on the run and they end up camping out in a remote cabin. And nothing scary has ever happened in one of those. This one has gotten comparisons to Stranger Things and to Jordan Peele's horror films. We also have Old Soul by Susan Barker. This is about two strangers who meet each other and find out they both have lost loved ones after their loved ones have encountered a very mysterious woman. And they soon discover that they are far from alone, that this woman has left many victims behind her. And so they crisscross the globe in order to discover who these victims are and learn more about the woman at its center. And then finally, we have Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, which is a queer feminist take on Carmilla, which was the novella that inspired Dracula. So I'm really excited to see kind of that take on a familiar story. Ava Reed says, this is a delicious tribute to the inherent horrors of womanhood and the desperate and exquisite vulgarity of desire. This is everything I dream of in a novel. Moving on to mystery, we have Trouble Island by Sharon Short. This one actually came out in December, but I wanted to include it here because it's something a little bit different from a lot of mysteries out there. This is a historical locked room mystery set in 1932, involving a gangster's wife, her maid, who has a secret identity, and a coterie of scoundrels, all trapped on an island during an ice storm. So this one is a landlocked mystery full of guns, gangsters, secrets, and surprises, with twists I didn't see coming and 1930s atmosphere to burn. For something a little cozier, we have Death in the Downline by Maria Abrams, out January 14th. So if you're a fan of all of those true crime stories and podcasts about cons and pyramid schemes and things like that, you'll want to pick up this mystery, which is about a woman who gets roped into a multi-level marketing organization called Luminous, and discovers that this organization has a lot of dark secrets behind its glamorous products. So if you really enjoyed the podcast, The Dream, which is all about multi-level marketing groups, you'll want to pick this one up. And then if you like your mysteries dark, Victorian, a bit Sherlockian, you'll want to read The Naming of the Birds by Porrick O'Donnell. This one is about a trio of detectives. And John McGregor says, this one is something very special, meaty, dark, exuberant, full of complicated people doing terrible things and difficult things in terrible circumstances. I recommend it to both those who love Victorian Gothic and those who usually run a mile from anything described as that, but enjoy having their preconceptions confounded. And then lastly, on mystery, we have Strange Pictures by Yukatsu. This is a very mysterious Japanese YouTube star who wears like a mask in all his videos and has taken to writing horror and has become a huge bestseller in Japan. And so this is a mystery novel in which 9 pictures, which you can see these kind of crude drawings on the cover, and each one holds clues to pieces of an overarching mystery. So this one is described as an addictive murder mystery that unfolds like pointillism on the page. Only when you reach the end, step back and view the bigger picture does each of its parts click into place. And so again, this one has already been a big bestseller in Japan. If you like more suspense and thrillers, we have Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. This one is about a true crime podcast host, and she invites her guests to come on and confess their secrets to her, except for she's hiding secrets of her own. And it turns out that someone might have figured them out anyway, even though she hasn't confessed. We also have You Are Fatally Invited by Andy Pelagio. This is a debut about a thriller writer who has an estate in Maine. He has invited a bunch of people to his house for this writing retreat and has invited an aspiring writer named Mila to host it. And Mila thinks this is the perfect place to not just plot a murder mystery, but to plot an actual murder. Except for someone else must have the same idea because a different body other than her intended victim ends up dead. If you like your mysteries in an academic setting, you'll like The Department by Jacqueline Faber. This is a dual timeline thriller about a college philosophy professor who becomes wrapped up in the mystery of a student's disappearance. And that might implicate his friends, his colleagues, and the other people around him. And then we have Splinter Effect by Andrew Luddington. This one, I didn't know what slide to put this one on because it is historical, time travel, adventure, thriller. So it is about a man named Robert Ward who works for the Smithsonian. He is a chronoarchaeologist. So think Indiana Jones, who encounters danger on the hunt for valuable artifacts. Only he's not just traveling the globe, he's also traveling through time as well. So his latest adventure has him hunting down a menorah that has last been seen in 6th century Constantinople. So time traveling Indiana Jones, sign me up. Speaking of the past, we have historical fiction, The Lotus Shoes by Jane Yang. This one is set in 1800s China and follows the entwined fates of the head of the Fong family and her maidservant, who are both cast out and must find their fates entwined together. We also have The Kennedy Girl by Julia Bryan Thomas. This is about a woman who gets discovered and is swept up into Paris and becomes a model, but there she's also recruited for an entirely different profession as a spy. And then finally, we have The Unexpected Diva by Tiffany L. Warren. Our diva of the title is Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, who was a Black opera star before the Civil War. She was born into slavery, but adopted by a white Quaker community, and ends up becoming a singer in order to make her way after her inheritance was contested. For literary fiction, I'm really excited for Playworld by Adam Ross. This is a coming-of-age novel that follows a child actor in 1980s New York who has an affair with an older friend of his mother. So this one is really full of like 1980s New York feel and flavor. It has a lot of humor, a lot of dark humor, as Ross's previous books have been. And Ron Charles from the Washington Post says, starting off 2025 with a novel this terrific gives me hope for the whole year. So I'm really excited to pick that one up. As well as Twist by Colin McCann, which comes out on March 25th. He's the author of Let the Great World Spin, among many other fabulous novels. This one follows an Irish journalist who is covering a crew that repairs the underground cables that make the information superhighway and the internet possible. But it's really about these three characters that come together. The ship's engineer that leads the South African actress that he's in love with, and this journalist who is chronicling their story. But it's also about the information that is crisscrossing the globe in the cables below the sea as well, and how that impacts the three of them as well. We also have The Dream Hotel by Layla Lalami. This author is a National Book Award and a Pulitzer finalist, and her latest is a speculative novel that is set in the near future, where surveillance is even more prevalent than it is already. Because we can also see into people's dreams and use that against them. So our main character, Sarah, is detained by the Risk Assessment Administration because her dreams reveal that she's about to harm her husband. So she is put into a detention facility where she meets other women who also have been detained and learns kind of the dark secrets that are there, and is held there indefinitely while she's trying to figure out how to get out of this kind of Kafka-esque nightmare that she's fallen into. And then Good Dirt by Charlene Wilkerson is by the author of Black Cake. This one is about a woman named Abby who is trying to trace her family's secrets through a family heirloom, a stored stoneware jar that has been passed through her family for many generations since her enslaved ancestors. And this stoneware jar was found near her brother who was murdered, and she thinks there might be some secret that involves this heirloom that connects to her brother's murder. All right, just a few quick romances to highlight. The Love Lyric by Christina Forrest. This is about a single mother who works for a beauty company who connects with an R&B star, but they're working together, so they really shouldn't have feelings for each other, but that doesn't stop them. And so this is kind of a fun contemporary romance. We also have Give Me Butterflies by Julian Meadows. If you really like Allie Hazelwood, this is the one to try. It's also a grumpy sunshine romance, as many of her books are, that has two scientists at its core. So he is an astronomer and she is an entomologist in this particular book. We also have Zoe Brennan First Crush by Laura Piper Lee. This one is about two rival vineyard owners during a wine festival. So I'm really excited about that one. And then we have The Girl Most Likely To by Julie Tu. This one is about Rachel Dang, who was awarded the Girl Most Likely to Succeed in high school. But now, as her high school reunion is approaching, she's lost her job. She's not much of a success. And so she's not sure whether she wants to go. She's invited by her friend, Danny, who she tutored in high school, and their roles have now reversed because he's the big success and she might need a leg up with her career. All right. And then last but not least, we have a handful of nonfiction books I'm excited about. We have You Didn't Hear This From Me by Kelsey McKinney. Kelsey McKinney is the host of the delightful podcast Normal Gossip, which will have you seriously invested in the drama surrounding strangers you don't know anything about. So she's the perfect guide to walk you through the cultural history of gossip, and she brings in her own personal connection as well. Hanif Abdurraqib says, a beautiful, expansive ode to the joy of information exchange, an ode that, like the practice of gossip itself, can be all at once inviting, tender, enlivening, and rich with humor, complexity, and an abundance of joys. So I'm very excited for that one. If the podcast Normal Gossip existed in the 1880s, it might have covered the historical true crime saga of the Walker family, depicted in Save Our Souls by Matthew Pearl. This one is about Frederick Walker, who is the captain of a fishing boat, and he sets out with his crew and his wife and his teenage sons. They encounter a storm and they are shipwrecked on an island that is not so deserted because there is a mysterious man named Hans already there. And so they spend 14 months on this island together in this true account that is a little bit Swiss Family Robinson and a little bit Lord of the Flies. So it's perfect for readers of David Grant. And we in Kansas City are prepping for the Super Bowl right now, but March Madness is just around the corner. And so I'm very excited for Magic in the Air by Mike Sealski, which is about one of the most fun plays in all of sports, the slam dunk. And so the author walks through not just our famous dunk artists like Wilt Chamberlain and Dr. J, and of course Michael Jordan, but he also walks through the importance of the slam dunk in basketball history and how it illuminates things like race in sports and media coverage and how basketball became a global phenomenon. And last, it's the end of our slides and the end of our world. So we have Everything Must Go, The Stories We Tell About the End of the World by Dorian Lynskey. So from cults to pop culture to conspiracy theories, we've long been obsessed and convinced that the end of the world is nigh. So the author, Dorian Lynskey, explores the apocalypse through the stories that we tell about it. So through film and through literature and through doomsday predictions that have happened over time, and how these various stories have shaped how we view the end of the world and how we view our current place in it. So I'm excited. As someone who really loves dystopian fiction and apocalyptic fiction and film, I'm really excited to see this kind of cultural exploration of it. So again, I just wanted to give you just a tiny little taste of a whole bunch of things so that hopefully you can find one or two things that caught your eye. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have or to hear about some of the things you're most excited for in 2025. I was a little ambitious and I put a few too many books on the slide, so I'm sorry you got such a speedy version, but I'm happy to talk in more detail about some of these.
I've also included a link to a survey. If you have a moment, take a link to that survey. We'd appreciate it. Okay, I don't see that we have any questions. Thank you, TJ.
Mhm. All right,
Okay,
so
nice. Mhm.
suspense, thrillers, romances. Yeah. I have to tell you, like, it was hard to narrow it down to just 4 things on each of these slides. So, yeah, there's lots of really great stuff coming in the next few months.
And I will be sending out an email with a recording of this as soon as it's uploaded, and all the links that Angie had in the chat will be included in that email. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully tomorrow, maybe not till Wednesday, but not too long.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do have, like, there's lots of really, like, V.E. Schwab has a new book, Taylor Jenkins Reid, lots of really Emily Henry. And so I tried not to include like the big best names you probably already don't know about. But yeah, lots of really great things coming out.
Okay. Well, great suggestions. Great. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future virtual programs. Thank you again, Angie, and everybody have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.